The ANC NEC had to postpone its special sitting yesterday, where the Section 89 panel report on President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala farm saga was to be discussed. The sitting failed due to Ramaphosa's absence, and the NEC felt it needed to review the report itself and consult with Ramaphosa directly in order to forge a way forward. Since the release of the report, Ramaphosa has only said through his spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, that he was consulting various people and looking at his options. What do we make of the President's lack of direct communication at this time? Well, political expert Professor Andre Duvenhage joins us for more on this. Professor, good afternoon. Appreciate your time today. Now, the CR17 campaign was built around cleaning up the amount of corruption that had gone on in the Jacob Zuma era. Isn't it ironic that the President now faces this predicament with Farmgate?
Well, I think the situation in the ANC is very serious at this point. I think as an organization, the ANC is basically falling apart. We have seen that already in the build-up to the national conference, but the whole Phala saga has made the point quite clear that the national executive is not in a position to take decisions. If your chairperson or your leader is not attending the meeting, it is signaling that he is jumping ship. He is not want to explain him in any way about the situation, and that is far-reaching in terms of an upcoming national conference that is scheduled for 2 weeks' time, and wherein he is seen as a favorite to win the leadership contest in that organization. Clearly, this is indicating to me that he had the intention to resign a day or two ago, but he was persuaded not to go through, and he is now looking at other possible options. But the situation of the ANC at this point is not a healthy one.
Okay, so you talk about options. What options are available to the President? I mean, as you say, 2 days ago, he certainly seemed to have his back up against the wall, and there were talks that the President is likely to resign in that State of the Nation address that we were expecting on Thursday evening. But in the last 48 hours, that has happened. Has he found some breathing room, do you think?
I am not so sure, but the strategy he can follow is to take the findings of the Commission on revision, asking for another opinion or a legal opinion about the outcome of the investigation, and this will mean that they are postponing this whole investigation. They won't have talks about this. This is a bit of a legal strategy. We can say a bit of Stalingrad light, and try then, in one way or another, to consolidate his position in the caucus of the party, and then going to the national conference and see what he can do. But I am afraid that already his image is tainted to the extent that he will find it difficult to be a legitimate candidate in terms of competition at this point in time. We must say that the findings of the Commission of Investigation was very, very strong findings. And I think he's going to find it difficult to explain himself within that context. And then secondly, we must take into consideration he presented himself as Mr. Clean. And now there is strong evidence linking him to some sort of misconduct. And I'm sure this will have an impact on how the members, the about 5,000 delegates, are going to look at him as a potential leader for the second term.
Well, maybe at this juncture, Professor, you could draw a parallel for us between serious misconduct and criminal misconduct. Because at this point, some parties argue that he hasn't done anything criminal.
Yes, that may be the case, and there's no formal investigation going. So from a legal point of view, from a step-aside perspective, he can compete. The process, however, can take a turn if they are going to debate this in Parliament, and if he is ending up in trouble, not receiving the necessary majorities, then he is in trouble. But the other question, and that to me is the more important one, what is the findings going to affect his image within this party, his standing within the party? What I have seen yesterday at the NEC meeting is a highly divided, rid with factionalism, lack of ability to take decisions, and some people even argue that the NEC conference collapsed. And I think there is merit in that view. The argument, however, was that the National Working Committee will sit today and then tomorrow they will re-look the situation. But clearly the NEC is divided. There's a lack of clear leadership. At the moment, it is survival of the fittest. And people are fighting for the interest. Not that sure that at the moment, the ANC as a party is taking as priority number one the national interest of South Africans. I think it is now everyone fighting for himself or herself, their position, their interest. And the big problem, as was the case so many times in the past, is the absence of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa under these circumstances.
Now, Professor, talks around the implosion of the ANC or factionalism have been the order of the day, certainly for the last few months. But I'd like to refer to Advocate Tulima Donsela, who was on Newzroom Afrika last night, and she says that Section 34 imposes duty to report corruption and not failure to report theft in your own house. So technically, he hasn't broken the law, so to speak.
As you know, politics is not so much about reality, it's not about legal positions, it's rather about people's perception. And I think there's a huge lot of people at the moment, inside and outside the ANC, arguing that Mr. Ramaphosa is guilty, that the findings is pinpointing him, and they are reacting according to their perceptions and their stereotype of the whole situation. And I think that is the bigger factor at this point in time. Strictly speaking, Tulima Donsela is right from a legal perspective. But when you argue it from a political and perceptional perspective, I think she's probably not right, and I think many people are going to assess Mr. Ramaphosa in a negative way based on the findings of the Commission.
Now, Professor, a number of players will impact how this case proceeds. So we have the ANC's NEC, NWC, we have the RET faction, we have the opposition, and we obviously have what's likely to transpire in Parliament on Tuesday. Your view on how these various parties are likely to add flavour to this whole mess, if you will?
I think the first hurdle will be for Mr. Ramaphosa to get the NEC, or at least the majority of the NEC behind him, and get the decision that from the NEC that the caucus within Parliament will support his position like they did so many times when it was the case with Jacob Zuma. And then, if he can have a strong position there, he can try to take the battle to opposition parties, create a majority decision, and take the process from there forward towards the national conference and the leadership election. However, there's a number of hurdles. First, I am not 100% sure that the NEC is going to support him. They would like to know what is going on. Then we also don't know what is the position of Mr. Ramaphosa himself. Is he going to resign, or is he going to take on this battle and fight the battle until the end? We aren't sure at this point. Then the other thing, how is the caucus within Parliament, the ANC caucus, going to react to this whole process? Are they going to see an NEC decision as binding, or are they going to vote in terms of their consciousness? And I must tell you, there are people with strong links to the RET faction also within the caucus of the ANC in Parliament. In combination with opposition parties, Mr. Ramaphosa may run into trouble. And at the moment, the whole situation is very uncertain. But to me, the biggest problem is the lack of response from the side of the President to the process itself and to role players within the bigger process.
Now, final question, very quickly, Professor. If the NEC does not back President Cyril Ramaphosa, certainly for candidature at the National Conference, what are their options? Zweli Mkhize, who's one of the candidates, has been fingered in that Digital Vibes saga. So at this point, there doesn't look like, well, it doesn't appear that there seems to be anybody who's untainted.
You know, there are a process within the ANC constitution that people can be nominated from the floor. And it's interesting that through the last 48, 72 hours, a number of names came up. The one name is the name of Paul Mashatile. And Mashatile, currently the favorite to become the next deputy president, may reposition himself towards the position of president. He has a lot of support. Then I also heard that the name of a former president in Kgalema Motlanthe is mentioned. You refer to Zweli Mkhize, who already is a candidate in this regard. And then another very interesting name is the one of Joel Netsetenze, a very influential thinker within the context of the ANC with a long history and who was very close to one of the former presidents, Thabo Mbeki. These are some of the names, but I must be honest with you, anything can happen. At this moment, the whole process is in flux.
Professor Duvenhage, appreciate your time this afternoon. A political expert, Professor Andre Duvenhage, unpacking for us that issue around the Phala farm report and what the options of the President are.